welcome back. Looks like we have everybody on screen that we need to. Hello, Kyle. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. And so everybody, just so you know, this session goes until 10:55. If we get done early, we will have a little extra break, or maybe we can glean some extra info from Andrew on what he's got going in his first month of his work there. 55 minutes. Use the Q&A tool at the bottom to get your questions in. And without further ado, I introduce Andrew Sloss, the Chief Economic Development Officer and CEO of the Brookings Economic Development Corporation. Andrew?
Good morning. Thank you, Kelsey. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and thanks to Kyle as well for joining us from GOED. As Kelsey mentioned, I am the CEO here for Brookings Economic Development after Al officially retired in December. So I've been here in Brookings since early October. And for those of you that don't know, I am a graduate like Kyle of SDSU, although he and I were not anywhere close to graduating at the same time. But I'm happy to be back in Brookings, as is my family. We've really enjoyed our time here, so I'm happy to take part in my first official Brookings Day. Kyle Peters is the Senior Business Development Representative for GOED. He manages projects and business development representatives on the east side of the river for the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and his focus is target industry is value-added agriculture. On a personal note, he grew up on a farm and ranch near White, South Dakota, White Lake, South Dakota, which he is still involved in. And he recently married Cassidy. And congratulations, Kyle, because I understand you are expecting your first child in July. So as a dad to a 5-year-old, soon to be 6, and a soon to be 2-year-old, I will tell you, get as much sleep as you can between now and July, because you'll never have that chance again. So anyways, we work closely with the GOED, and I've worked with Kyle a little bit during my time here as site selectors. Corporate real estate individuals or business owners are interested in moving, expanding, relocating to South Dakota. Most oftentimes they reach out to the Governor's Office of Economic Development to start an RFI process. And that kind of gets divvies out. Kyle, you can go into that more detail if you want. And then if one of the communities, such as Brookings, is on the list, then we get a request for information from GOED, and we complete that, turn that back into GOED, and then they distribute that to the company in the site selection process. And then we kind of just go through that process from there if we are included in the next round. So with that, I will turn it over to Kyle. Kyle, thank you. I think you're going to have to unmute yourself, but welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you guys for having me here. I'm excited to talk a little bit about GOED and brag about Brookings. But yeah, I guess I should probably start with what Andrew was saying. I am an SDSU grad. I graduated with ag business there, and then I had a minor in banking and financial services. So very familiar with the community of Brookings, loved it, worked there for a few years at Bankstar Financial. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that bank. Loved it there, great people. So it was hard for us to leave, but we're in Pierre now. And so it's a little bit different. There's a little bit more hunting and fishing opportunities in Pierre though, so I'm not complaining. But yeah, about GOED. So for those of you that don't know, what the Governor's Office of Economic Development does, just to summarize in 3 quick bullet points, we expand the property tax base, we provide good paying jobs, and we enhance the quality of life for all South Dakotans. Now, I know that kind of sounds like something you would probably read on a fortune cookie, but that's actually what we do. And those are layman's terms, but we take pride in doing that. And so when I talk about good paying jobs, for the Governor's Office of Economic Development, I'll go in detail about this in a little bit. We have financing programs that we use to help businesses meet their goals. And so we want to make sure that we're giving those taxpayer dollars essentially, because that's what those funds are that we're lending out to good companies. And so these are companies that we want to see have good paying jobs, good benefits, and that we know they're going to stay here in South Dakota for a while. So we want to make sure we have our return on investment for sure. So that being said, I'll talk a little bit about what we did in 2020. And so 2020 was a big year for us. We helped facilitate $2.8 billion in total capital investment. Yeah, that's billion with a B. So a big year for us. And those are just wins that our office had something to do with. And so we might help facilitate a meeting or give them money or whatever that might be, but we helped capture that $2.8 billion in total capital investment. And these wins come from manufacturing, distribution, housing, technology, energy, and agriculture. So it's kind of across the board. As you know, in South Dakota, agriculture is our #1 industry. So a lot of those had something to do with ag, but nevertheless, we certainly covered the board. So in 2020, we had 27 business prospects visit our state. And so what I mean by that, we call these hostings in economic development world. So I have a company in XYZ that might be in North Carolina. They're interested in coming to South Dakota, and they're not quite sure what they want, but they know they're interested. And so they come to South Dakota, and I would work with Andrew on perhaps facilitating some of those meetings. If they say they want to be, along I-29 interstate, they need access to an airport, they need natural gas, they need sufficient water. So those are kind of the things that we check the box on before they come here. And so when the business prospect comes here, this is our chance to brag about South Dakota. We talk a little bit about our tax climate. We talk about, our ability to be nimble since we're a small state. And then we also talk about the communities that we're in. So in 2020, we had 27 businesses visit our state, which is pretty substantial considering the year that we had. Everybody was hunkered down, and South Dakota got to work, and we never closed down. So that was pretty appealing to most people. We also sent out 23 proposal letters to companies, 63 proposal letters to companies. So what a proposal letter is from our office is a letter of interest. It's not necessarily an approval. We actually call them invitation to apply letters because that's essentially what they are. We'll give a company a proposal letter, and it'll say in there the program that we think we can do, subject to due diligence. And then once that proposal letter is out, then they're free to submit their application with the appropriate program. Let's see here. We conducted 395 retention and expansion visits. So retention expansion visits, or R&E visits for short, is what we call them in economic development. Those are visits that we do with in-state companies. So for instance, I would call up 3M in Brookings, and I would say, I'm Kyle Peters, I'm the Senior Business Development from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. It looks like we haven't been to your place in about a year. We'd like to just come check in on you, see how things are going, see if there's anything that's, we can help with, if there's something that's an issue we can address. And so these are important for us in GOED and as well as Andrew, because we want to make sure that there's really not any red flags, so to speak. We want to make sure that everything's going smoothly. If 3M has an issue with something, we want to make sure we get them to the appropriate agency on a state level. And then it also gives us some time to sit down and visit with them candidly and make sure that, if there is an expansion in the future, that they're considering South Dakota and not another state. So we just want to make sure that we're in close contact with them and that they know that they have the appropriate resources in South Dakota to do so. So again, in 2020, we had 60 companies that announced that they were either moving or expanding here in South Dakota. So again, and I'll bang this drum pretty loud here because we had a really weird 2020. And so for us to have 60 companies that were either moving here or expanding, we call that a pretty big win in our office, just because we weren't sure there for a while what it was going to look like for South Dakota's economy, right away in March when everything was shut down. But we really turned the corner and we turned it quickly. And we're pretty pleased to say that 60 companies are going to either move here or expand. So just to pivot a little bit on that, to talk a little bit more about the pandemic and what South Dakota and the Governor's Office of Economic Development did to address that. We released Governor-owned Small Business Economic Injury and Disaster Loan Program. Now that was the first program that came out from our office. It's a little confusing because there were a few of them that came out, but this was the first one that Governor Noem announced weeks after everything shut down for South Dakota. And so this was a $10.5 million fund that was approved by the legislature for loans for negative impacted businesses. And so we reviewed and underwrote more than 500 applications in less than a month. And so our staff who didn't necessarily have banking experience. I worked in the banking sector, the private sector, for 4 years before this job, so I had a pretty good idea. But there were some staff members that didn't have any banking experience that were asked to help underwrite these loans because we wanted to make sure we had that money out the door as quickly as possible. So we fielded hundreds of phone calls, and then within 10 days of the time the legislature approved the $10.5 million, the money was out the door. And so we were pretty pleased by that because we weren't sure how it was going to look as far as underwriting loans and getting the money funded. And we partnered with some good people, and we got that money out the door. And then within 3 weeks, we had approved 200 loans, and the money was gone. And so it's not, 200 loans, 200 businesses might not seem like that much, but within 3 weeks, we were pretty proud of ourselves. And then by week 5, all money was out the door. So just to put that in perspective, that's nearly double what we've approved under the Ready Loan program for the last 10 years combined. We approved more loans in 3 to 5 weeks than we have in the last 10 years. So we were pretty proud of that. And then also during that time, we launched a marketing campaign to our neighboring state, Minnesota, which was almost completely shut down. The campaign, South Dakota Means Business, launched ads in Minnesota right before the 4th of July holiday, and then it continued through Labor Day. The campaign resulted in getting terrific exposure for our state, including 1.5 million video views. Since then, our phones have been blowing up. And I can't say enough about the Minnesota campaign. I've only been with the Governor's Office of Economic Development for a couple years. I came in with the Nome administration, and I have never seen an uptick in people calling our office like it was when we did the Minnesota campaign. So we did get some pretty good leads off that. As you know, in economic development, it takes a while for those leads to come to fruition, but we were pretty proud of that as well. So switching gears over to the ag industry, and like I said earlier, ag is our #1 industry, and I'm a farm boy, so I like to brag about the ag industry. But we were pretty proud of ourselves there too. Agriculture is by far our largest industry. It generated $32.5 billion in economic activity between production ag and ag processing. Production agriculture comprises of a higher percentage of our economy by gross domestic product than any other state. And I know South Dakota State University has a lot to thank for that. They have a great program up there. I know from experience. And a quick story, I was in California for the World Ag Expo in February of 2020, and we were there to do some dairy development outreach. And everybody that we talked to, literally everybody, and we talked to hundreds of dairymen out there, they all knew where South Dakota State University was and the I-29 dairy corridor. So we should all be pretty proud of that. So with our growing dairy herd population, increased milk population, and continued dairy permitting, we are looking at a really good 2021. It looks like that we do have 6 dairies that are already permitted in the state that will be building here really soon. As of January 2020, South Dakota dairy herd totaled 127,000 cows. In the last 5 years, it's had the second highest rate of growth in the nation, increasing the number of dairy cows to 25.8%, or about 28,000 cows. So in the next 2 years, we're going to see, like I said, 6 dairies be constructed, and that's going to increase the inventory about 65,000 head. And so we're excited for that. That's nearly a 50% increase from where we're at today. And not only does dairy production help, cheese processing and the farmers and the basis of crops, but it also helps local communities because those farmers come in to town to buy their pickups, to buy their groceries. So we're looking at a pretty good 2021 so far in the ag industry. So South Dakota GDP and unemployment rate right now, South Dakota's unemployment rate is currently at 3.5%. A number that rivals our pre-pandemic number in January of 2020 that is at 3.8%. Today's unemployment rate is a decrease of 0.2% from where we were at just a month ago. So our GDP remains strong. We've had the 12th highest rate of recovery among the states. And as South Dakota continues to see tax receipts for the fiscal year of 2021 that are higher than the previous fiscal year, as well as budgeted amounts. So as you guys know, South Dakota is getting a lot of national attention right now just because we did take a different route than most states did in terms of businesses and local authority. and not having the state of South Dakota shut down those small businesses. And that's going to give us the edge, I think, within the next couple of years of recruiting businesses. And so, I think it's helped tremendously that Governor Noem's been leading us, and she's been a lot more receptive to small businesses and not making mandates and closing them down just because of what feels good. She's doing things because she wants to do good, not what feels good. So the Ready Housing Program, we rolled this out in 2020. Our Ready program is by far our flagship program, so to speak, and that is our 2% interest secondary financing tool that we can go up to 45% of total project costs on. We started using that for housing. And so when in economic development, when we're hosting people like I was talking about before, a lot of questions come up about workforce and housing. And it's kind of the chicken and the egg, because people don't really want to build houses if they don't have anybody to put them in. And people don't want to build businesses here because there might not be workforce, and that workforce is going to need housing. And so it's the chicken and the egg. If somebody could tell me how to solve that, that would be great, because that would make my job a lot easier. But so far, we haven't figured out how. But we figured out a few ways to help, and that is with our Ready Housing Program. And so, like I said, our Ready program is our flagship program, and we're using 20% of that Ready fund just for multifamily housing. And so it has to be multifamily housing. You can't call up our office as an individual and say, hey, I'm building a house for me and my family. Can the state of South Dakota help? It needs to be apartments, townhouses, Dakotaplex would work, and things like that, because we want to make sure that these companies that are coming here have adequate workforce housing so that they don't have any red flags and want to leave South Dakota. So actually just this past week, I know it's not in Brookings, but I got to say it, Watertown was approved the largest Ready loan in South Dakota history for a housing project that they're doing up there. The Ready loan was about $12.8 million, which is 45% of a $28 million project. So by far the biggest Ready loan that we've ever approved, and it was just last week. Watertown had a housing study that was done a year or two ago, and they were essentially at 0% vacancy for multifamily housing. So something needed to happen, and we're happy for them. We want to help where we can, and I think that was the second Ready loan housing that we've ever done to come in at $12 million is really a testament to how aggressive we are here at GOED to push multifamily housing. So if there is somebody in Brookings that's willing to build some multifamily housing, please have them talk to Andrew, and Andrew can get a hold of us, and we can work together on that. We want to make sure that people are being incentivized for sticking their neck out there to help address workforce housing. So just to recap everything that I've gone over, South Dakota helped facilitate $2.8 billion in total capital investment. We announced 60 companies moving or expanding in South Dakota. We launched Governor Noem's $10.5 million Small Business Disaster Relief Fund and underwrote more than 500 applications. Again, that's more loans from our Ready Fund in the last 10 years. 23,000 South Dakota businesses applied and received $1.7 billion in payment protection loans. We had a very successful marketing campaign in Minnesota, and we are working on those leads right now. But we have too much to do. We have too much more in recruitment and workforce attraction. We are looking at $252 million in economic development and agriculture-related businesses. We lead the nation in housing building permits. I thought this was kind of a cool fact. So we lead the nation in housing building permits. In November, a year-to-year comparison ranked us #1 in percentage growth with a 61.9% increase. So my wife is a real estate appraiser in Pierre. And so a little side story here. She is so booked out because so many people are wanting to move to South Dakota, and this is just on the residential side. And so it's not uncommon for her to do 8 to 10 real estate appraisals a week. And this is just in Pierre. And as you know, Pierre is about three hours from anything. So So she's just doing that in Pierre and then usually about an hour of commute around there. And so that's not accounting Sioux Falls, Rapid City, Brookings, Watertown, Aberdeen. That's just in Pierre. So that's kind of a neat fact. I talked to some real estate agents that also said that they have an offer on almost every house that they have listed. So South Dakota is certainly getting some attention. And then last but certainly not least, our unemployment rate is currently at 3.5%. You know, I don't think that I can stress that enough. That speaks volumes about how South Dakota handled everything. You know, we're a small state, so it doesn't take long for us to get upside down in a hurry. And I think, you know, a 3.5% unemployment rate during a pandemic is something we should all be proud of. And that's everybody's help. That's not just the state. That's everybody that was involved in there. So we're very proud of everybody, and certainly hope for a profitable 2021. With that, I will stand down with any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle. That was a lot of information, and I kind of want to put my house on the market and become a real estate appraiser, but I won't. I'm going to continue with this work here because it's too much fun. Okay, so we have a few points we wonder if you can touch on, and then as Q&A come in, I will address those as well. So a technical college presence in Brookings, what would that look like? If you have context for that as well, maybe you can provide a little bit of insight into that.
So you're asking about a technical college to come to Brookings?
I believe there were talks about a satellite location in Brookings. I might be wrong there, but it just says technical college presence in Brookings. Yeah.
Like I said, when we were in California this past February for the World Egg Expo, everybody knew where South Dakota State University was. And so I certainly think that could yield success. As far as how to navigate the appropriate channels of getting a technical institute there, that would probably fall more on the governor and the Department of Education. But if somebody does have something that they're thinking of or knows somebody that's interested in it, please let me know and we can help facilitate that.
Okay. We had one come in the chat here. So previously, we have talked about SDSU research discoveries providing new innovations for businesses to commercialize and build more economic activity. How can SDSU more effectively help GOED develop the state's economy by commercializing SDSU research discoveries?
That's a great question. This is something that we get often. And, you know, for us, I think it's just important that we keep a close line of communication. You know, when something surfaces, we want to make sure that we're in direct contact with the university right away. But one thing that I would talk about just for GOED's programs is we have a program called the Proof of Concept. And this is something that I would like to see more utilized in the universities, because the Proof of Concept is a program that's up to $25,000 for exactly what it says. It's the proof of concept. So if the student has something that they think that they've either invented or they think that they could see success in the future, it's an application through our office that could be a $25,000 grant to them just to help, you know, see it come to fruition. And so if it's a little bit tricky because it's a grant/loan. And so if the student has a gadget, if you will, that he or she wants to do, they apply through us, and if it sees success, then they're required to pay that $25,000 back at 0% interest over the course of 5 years. So if they take it to market and they can sell some and they're getting money off it, then they're required to pay that loan back. And on the flip side of that, if they are not seeing success with it, if it didn't work out, then that loan's forgiven. $25,000 for them to use, it's forgiven, and then hopefully they come back to us and have another one we can try. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I think that just keeping that close line of communication will certainly help with us. You're on mute, Kelsey.
I'm going to do that at least 2 more times today.
Surprised I haven't.
What is the view of immigration and GOED's role in ensuring their and the community's success, especially given the potential employment need in South Dakota?
That's also a good question. And so when it comes to immigration, that's usually a federal issue. And so we all have close lines of communication with Congressman Johnson's office, Senator Thune's office, and Senator Rounds' office. And so we've had it before where there have been immigrants wanting to come. And so those are processes that we rely on our federal delegation to help us with, but we're certainly open to it. We love to see the workforce. I work in Huron. Like I said, I cover the east side of the river, and Huron has seen a lot of immigration, and they've seen a lot of success with that immigration. So we're certainly receptive to that.
Lovely. Another one in the chat here. It is great to hear about the growth of dairy in our area. Do we know what is driving that growth? Is there significant industry growth or supply needs in South Dakota?
That's a great question, Russ. And to put it in simple terms, it's just the cost of doing business in South Dakota. Our tax climate is excellent for businesses. And I'm not going to lie, I came from a beef ranch, growing up. And so dairy was kind of foreign to me, but I've learned a lot about it in the past couple of years. And what's really driving that is our cheese processors and our dairymen. Tim Zamowski from Agripur and Lake Norton does a phenomenal job of outreach, trying to recruit more dairies to come to South Dakota. He's always willing to entertain an expansion if a new dairy does come. But also SDSU. SDSU has one of the best, if not the best, dairy program in the nation. And so we're seeing folks stay here because of their education.
I would just like it for the record to show that I received a bronze at state FFA for dairy cow judging. And previous to that year, I hadn't even seen a dairy cow in person in my life.
I think we should have a whole section just for you to talk about that.
It was a fun year.
Yes.
Okay, so another question, Paul Brazino, our city manager, asks, can you explain further why the READY program is only available for multifamily and not single family workforce housing?
Good question. And so our READY program is actually, it was rolled out for just business expansion. This is the first year we've ever done housing for it. And so just to give you a little history on the READY loan, I believe that was approved during the Mickelson administration. And it was back then one of the biggest programs that they could do. And so it's 2% money at a 45% total project cost is what we can go in on over a 20-year term, and it balloons in 5 years. And so we typically, and just again, for some history on it, what we would see kind of our bread and butter for the READY program is if a company comes to South Dakota and they need help purchasing some land or building a building. And so the READY program is just for fixed assets. So your buildings, land, equipment, and machinery. It's not for working capital. It's not for inventory. It's just for your fixed assets. And so the business will come to us and say, I need help building or buying this building. The bank is only in at 45% and I can't come up with the rest in cash. What can I do? And so that's where the state of South Dakota can do secondary financing to that business. And so we do require a 10% equity contribution, but 10% equity contribution is a lot better than what could be 65% equity contribution. So that's what the READY program was made for. Now, dialing it back to READY housing, we seen a concern with workforce housing. We said, what can we do within our programs to help with this? And so we use 20% of this fund for workforce housing. And so why can't we use it for single family housing? Is because it gets to be a mess with the FDIC. It just comes down to federal regulations and for the state of South Dakota to be lending money to a private person rather than to a company or a corporation or a legal entity. And again, that's more of the finance team that's done the homework on that than I have. But that was my understanding, is that there's just too many federal regulations for the state of South Dakota to lend directly to non-business entities.
What about, never mind, I'm not going to ask that question. Okay, so another question came in from our economic development director here. Going back to the proof of concept fund, has there been any discussion in increasing the grant amount from that, was it 25,000?
Good question, Andrew. And to my knowledge, there has not been. That's not a program that we see fly off the shelves. That program in my 2 years, I've had one company that I've worked with on it. So again, I think that we try to promote those programs as much as we can on the state, but we would also ask the communities to certainly spread the news on those. We're only as good as the information that we're given. And so as far as to up the grant amount, I don't know if I see that in the future, but certainly worth a conversation with our commissioner.
Lovely. Can you talk a little bit about the future of the reinvestment payment program and the South Dakota Jobs Program? In particular, talk a little bit about what that looks like, and are there a change in the requirements possible?
Good question. So the reinvestment payment program, we have two buckets. So one bucket is just the reinvestment payment program, and we have another bucket called the livestock reinvestment payment program. So these are two different programs, and it's important for us to know that when I'm explaining it, because I'm going to talk about the reinvestment payment program first, and then I'll go over to the livestock. So the reinvestment payment program was approved by the legislature, I believe, in 2013. It was a program at the time that was approved to help recruit wind companies to come to South Dakota. And so this is a tax rebate back to the company, not necessarily the wind company. It could be manufacturing, processing, wind, whatever. That is a rebate back to the company. And so we can only rebate sales and use tax on the building materials or the equipment that they buy. And so if we have $1 million project that's coming to South Dakota and they're getting taxed at 4.5% because 4.5% is our sales and use tax rate, they're gonna pay X amount. And so our office can work through an application, rebating that money back to them to offset some of that burden to come to South Dakota. And so typically, we fall within that 50% sales and use tax rebate. So we'd be doing 50% back of the sales and use tax on a $1 million project back to the company. And so we don't get that money, they pay us and we sign it back. So going over to the livestock piece, this is probably something that you guys have heard more about recently because this is relatively new under Governor Noem's administration as well. The livestock reinvestment payment is exactly like the other one, but it's just for counties. And so it's just for livestock development. So if we're building a dairy in Brookings County and it triggers two things, it has to have two triggers. It has to add livestock to the county, and then it has to require a conditional use permit. So if we're seeing a 5,000 cow dairy come to Brookings County, they call us and say, is there anything the governor's office of economic development can do for my project? We would say, absolutely. We'd have the livestock reinvestment payment program. And so everything that the dairy would pay for sales and use tax is 100%, no strings attached, rebated back to the county. And so the state does not get that money, and it does not go back to the dairyman or the developer. It goes to the county. And so we did that because a lot of these counties were wanting livestock development to come to their county, but it was so burdensome on their roads, on their infrastructure, they couldn't keep up. And so they asked us how the state of South Dakota could help offset that. And so that's how we did it. We've seen a lot of success with that. I'm sure you see that in the news and the papers all the time about conditional use permits being approved for XYZ dairy or beef lot, and the county is getting, $300,000 to $1 million back in sales and use tax. So that's pretty common. You're on mute again, Kelsey.
Dang it. Thank you, Kyle. The Economic Development Partnership Program, the EDPP program, what's the future of that looking like?
That would be a great question for our former community development representatives. I don't have a lot of history in that. I do know that has since went away. There's no more funds in that. And somebody brought that up a couple of weeks ago, and it sounds like there's not going to be any more funds in that. But again, I'm not sure on that. I have to do a little homework on that.
Yeah, that was a great program. I remember we utilized it when I was in Wagner, and it was very helpful for a lot of rural communities and smaller towns around the Brookings area might benefit.
Right.
I touched on that one already. Last question I have, so hopefully some come in the Q&A here. What is being done to recruit value-added ag businesses, dairies, processing plants, et cetera?
That's a really good question. It's really relevant to what we're working on now at GOED. And as far as what we're doing, you know, we're doing a lot of outreach. And when I say we, GOED is doing a lot of outreach to processors. But what's really driving that is the amount of cattle coming into South Dakota. So if there's one thing that I've learned in the dairy industry is it's a very, very tight-knit, close group of producers. And so they all talk. The processors talk to the dairymen, other processors talk to other processors. And so even though that they're competitors, they still have a good relationship. And so a lot of it is word of mouth. You know, it's not a secret that a lot of our cheese processors are at max capacity, and we need to see more of that to grow our dairy cattle. And so a lot of that is just word of mouth, but GOED is also doing a lot of outreach, and we're hoping to have some success with that in 2021.
Awesome. Well, that is all of the questions that I have for you, Kyle. Oh, one more came in. Thank you, Daniel Scholl. One limitation to using proof of concept grants is relative lack of funding after the POC stage to further de-risk a product before venture capital is willing to invest. Would GOED consider tackling this challenge? You know, this might also go back to Andrew's question with increasing that amount or going back to the fund for another.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, Daniel. And to answer that, that's where things get in a little bit of what we would call a gray area. You know, they probably don't have the appropriate historical tax returns to get traditional financing to start their business. But that's where we try to rely on some of our community and local revolving loan funds. You know, depending on what community that they want to be in. Let's just say they want to be in Brookings and there might be a small revolving loan fund there. We would ask that if we can't do it at GOED, that we at least try to partner with the revolving loan fund on financing them after the proof of concept stage so they can get on their feet a little bit. You know, you're exactly right. And we don't want them to fall flat on their face. We want to help them keep growing because that's why we gave them the proof of concept in the first place.
Lovely. Okay, well, with that, Kyle, thank you so much for giving us your time today. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on your big news and the coming prize in July. And we look forward to working with you soon.
Thank you. And Andrew, welcome. I'm excited to work with you in the future.
You bet. We got to give him a hard time. He's a pretty cool guy. We like him.
Good. Don't get rid of him.
All right, everybody. So we're going to go on break again. I will put the slide deck up. If anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, you can go ahead and chat me or shoot me a text message, give me a call, and we will be back at 11 a.m. Thanks, everyone.